Welcome back to SharePoint Charts Complete Training. In this training session, we're going to look at how to get summary data based on dates. This is a very common scenario with charting. We often want to see a progression of data over time. We want to see trending, how things are going, whether they're going up or down, or whatever the case may be. So this session is aimed at showing you how to take a large set of records that have data information and roll that up into summary data, which we can use with the charts, which we're going to get to later. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm back in my SharePoint Charts training site that I created. If you don't have your own dedicated training site, you certainly need to do that. And these trainings are building one upon the other. So do make sure you download all the materials and complete all the assignments before you progress and move on to the next session, just so that you have all the tools and information you need in order to be successful with each successive training. Okay, so for this training, we're working with 3 Excel workbooks. So the first thing that you should do is download these 3 workbooks to your local computer, and then once you've done that, you're going to be ready to do this next step, which I'm going to do now. So I've downloaded those 3 workbooks, and what we want to do is open each of them in Excel. We're going to use that export function. We did this in the previous training as well. So I'm just going to do that one at a time. So for this training, we have this fictional company, Wise Industries. So this is just dummy data. So make sure you do enable editing, and then once you're in there, click on table design. And what we need to do is export this to SharePoint. So I need that SharePoint site URL for the next step. So I'm going to copy that and come back to Excel and export to SharePoint list. It needs to know the URL, and then let's stick with the name provided. So this was Wise Industries, what was it? Orders. So that's what we'll call our list. Okay, and then it gives us some information based on what it sees in there. You can go ahead and ignore that information right there. So that's fine. Okay, it gives me success dialog. Okay, so then just close that workbook. Then we've got 2 more to do. The next one is Wise Industries counts, 1 row, and then I need to do enable editing. And you can kind of look at the data when you pull it up. So this is what's going to be where our data goes in our SharePoint list. We'll look at that closer in a second. So click on table design, then click on export to SharePoint, paste in that SharePoint site URL that you have, and then we want to make the name match what we have for the workbook. So this is Wise Industries counts, 1 row. Okay, and you can see it recognizes we have a bunch of number fields and 1 text field. That's fine. Okay, we close that workbook, and we have 1 more SharePoint list we need to create from a workbook. So that's this last one. Enable editing, and click on table design, then export to SharePoint, paste your site URL, and then Wise Industries counts multi-row. Okay. Okay, we get 1 more confirmation, that's fine. Click finish. There's our success dialog. and we don't need to worry about anything with those Excel workbooks anymore at this point. So I'm going to go to my site contents, and that's where you'll find these 3 lists that I brought in. We'll just take a peek at those real quick just to have an understanding of what we're working with before we move on to the next part of the training. So we've got the orders. So this just matches what came from Excel. We just have a set of fields. For the sake of this training, we're really only interested in the date field, and then we have an order. So these are order rows, and they span throughout the calendar year for 2023. We've got a total of 100 records, and what we're going to be doing is getting summary counts based on how many orders we had for each month. Now, with the charting, we have 2 different kinds of charts. Some charts will work specifically with 1 row of data, and so that's why we have this workbook we imported to a list called Wise Industries Counts 1 row. It's for that scenario. And then the other one is the multi-row scenario. So you get a little farther down the line, it's going to be clear to you why you train to do both of these, because it just depends on which chart template you're using, and you'll make a choice according to that. So the same type of information is just broken out a different way. So in this case, you see that we have the months of the year, and then we just have a count column. In this case, the start and end date are filled in for the month, and you'll see how those are going to be used in the workflow. Okay, so we've got those lists ready to go. Our goal is to populate these lists with summary totals through our Power Automate workflow. Okay, so most of the rest of our training, it's all going to be in Power Automate. So we're going to be working on 2 workflows to summarize that data. So let's go ahead and do a new flow, and I'm going to select Instant Cloud Flow. Now, for all these data summary workflows, what you're normally going to do is set these in a schedule. You're going to want this to, on a recurring schedule, run so it'll retotal from that source data for you. That's something you can easily switch over later. Okay, and we'll move on to the next step. Sorry about that. All right, so this is going to be get summary date data 1 row. I'll do manually trigger flow and create. All right, we don't need any inputs. So in both of these workflows, we're going to start out with the get items action. And we just select that. And I just need to go to my charts practice site. So you'll pick your own. And then I need to select the list. So the list that has our source data is called Wise Industries Orders. Okay. And then we're going to do show advanced items. And in a previous training I mentioned to you, when it's suppressed, we get an error or warning message if we don't use a filter query. So Power Automate really wants us to use filter queries. So we're in a situation where we want all records. So this is a little trick that you can use. I'm saying ID not equals 0, which just means all records. That'll suppress that warning message. And then I'm going to go to the settings. By default, the get items block is only going to return 100 records. Now that would cover us in this scenario, but I encourage you to always do this as a habit. Otherwise you can get yourself tripped up. So we want to turn on pagination and change the threshold. I like to use the 5,000, which is the SharePoint list view threshold. All right, so pretty simple. We're just getting all Wise Industries orders. And I like to rename them to make them more specific. It helps me keep track of what I'm doing, so I will do that. Okay, and the next thing we need to do is start using filter array statements. And in the notes in the SharePoint Charts Complete training site, you're going to want to reference some of that as we go along. Okay, so when right now we're getting info for filter array for one row. So I've got a code snippet that you're going to want to use, and it'll make things a little bit easier for you. Now at this point, what you should do is open a text editor. I like to use Notepad++. That's a free tool that you can find online, but you can use whatever code or text editor tool that you prefer. So I've pasted that into my Notepad++. I added one more plus. Okay, so I just want to keep that handy, and you'll see why I want to have that in 1 second. Okay, so I need to do, just type filter, and the first thing, or usually at the top of the list, it'll show you filter array right away. And these are really handy. In fact, for the rest of our training in the session, you'll get to be very familiar with filter array. Now in the first summary data session, we didn't need to go to advanced mode. In this case, we do need to do that. So click on edit in advanced mode. For the array, it's easy. There's only one option listed. We want to reference from our get items block. And then down below, that's where we're gonna paste in our statement. Okay, so I've got that in my text editor, and then I'm gonna just come in here, select all, and paste. Okay, and this is referencing the date field in Wise Industries orders. So what this code is saying, we want to get the set of records inside of that, a filtered set of records, where that date is more than January 1 of this year and less than January 31st this year. So in other words, everything from January. And then I'm going to rename this. So we'll say January orders. Now, in the case of this one row, we have a field to store each of these. Okay, so we're going to need one for every single month. So we're got a kind of a copy and paste scenario. One thing you can do, which is going to make things a lot easier, is just go ahead and do copy to clipboard. I'm going to collapse this, and then I'm going to do new step and do my clipboard and do paste. Okay, and I know I'm going to have 12 of them, so I might as well just do them all, one right after the other. So I'll just keep doing that. Okay, so I'm going to do clipboard and just repeat until I have 12 of these. Clipboard. You can say it automatically renames. We're going to rename these in just a second. So just keep going. I got to do 6 more. One for each of the calendar months. Three more to go. Alright, we've got 12 of them. The next thing I want to do is rename them, because that drives me crazy if I don't have them named. It just helps you stay organized. So I'm just going to click into the top and say, okay, this is February orders. March orders. You can name them, with the full name of the month, however you want to do it. It's not exact. This helps us in the last step where we write it back to our summary record. Okay, and we got May orders. June. July. August. September. October. November. And last one. All right, now we need to modify those because they're not going to have the right code. So we need to change that date range for each of these. So that's where the copy and paste is going to come in handy. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change it here. Now you might wonder why I'm not doing it in the formula box. The reason is I'm going to show you. I'm going to do one of them in the formula box and you're going to see exactly why. It acts a little funny. As soon as I modify this, it immediately moves the cursor. And it drives me crazy. I don't know why it's that way. I'm hoping that's something they'll correct in the future. But in this advanced edit mode, it acts a little bit quirky. So that is why you should copy and paste. Otherwise, you're going to get very frustrated very quickly. I need to change this to 28. Literally every time I make any change, it immediately jumps the cursor to the end of the line. So that's not efficient, not useful, and that's why you want to copy and paste. Okay, so the February date range is correct, and we're going to do copy and paste the rest of the way so I don't go crazy. Okay, so March, you can see I'm just changing the date values here, and then I can just select all, and I can select all here, and paste. Boom, March is done. And then just rinse and repeat. Okay, now we can go to April. So just come in here again. April has 30 days. So I select that. And come down here. There's April. Now you see why it's important to label the headers on this. There goes April. Now we'll go to May. May has 31 days. Okay, select all and paste. June. June is 30 days. And so this does get a little bit tedious. And you'll see when we get to the next one, it's a little more efficient. We're looping through records, and so you may prefer that type of summary data, but you're going to get faster and more efficient with these as you get a little bit of practice, and it'll become kind of second nature to you after you've done this a few times. All right, so there's July. I'm going to come to here, and I need 31 days for July. And it's just copy and paste back and forth. Okay, there's July. Now we can move on to August. 8th month and 31 days. Okay, now we're ready for September. That. We can do October. So that's 10/1 to 10/31. Okay, got 2 more. November to November 30th. November, and then we got the last month, and we'll be done with this tedious part of our workflow setup. Okay, so basically we've prepared all these sets of records, which is going to set us up to easily be able to do our last step. So now we're ready to update an item in SharePoint, and so we pick that update item action, and we're interested in the one row of data. So I got to pick my site first, and then Wise Industries counts one row. That's the record. Now for the summary record, it's just one record. So in this case, I just pick one because that's always the ID of the first item on the list. I don't need to update the title. We already had that. We're going to be using this length function again. If you remember in the last summary data training, we used the length function to get a count from this filter array. So we're going to use that over and over again. So for January, what I do is I just type length. It's going to suggest that to me. I can hit the tab to shortcut and complete that. And then now you see where those descriptions are handy. If I come down through this, I can scroll down, and they're in reverse order. So I just click body, and you can see it automatically fills that in for me. And so another rinse and repeat scenario, I just start by typing length, and I'm going to reference February. So scroll on down, pick that, and OK. And then we just go on to the next one. So March. And then I come down here and find March. I'm just filling in all these, then we'll be done and ready to use our workflow. Length. April for this one. There it is. May. Scroll until we get to May. There it is. June. Alright. You have to keep scrolling it down a lot. There it is. Go to July. Scroll, there's two scroll bars. You gotta scroll them both down. Whoops, I hit it multiple times. What am I doing? Let me start that over. Length. Dynamic content. July. You can kind of fast forward through this if you get the gist of it. Length. This is for August. Length. Now we're kind of getting up to the top of the list. For October. Two more. Length. Hopefully you're working along with this. This is a key part of the training. This is how you're really going to absorb these concepts, and that's why these materials are being provided to you so that you can replicate exactly what you're seeing me do on the screen. And that's what's going to make it click, and that's what's going to allow you to apply this same approach when you need to work with your own lists. All right, there's December. I forgot to hit a button there. Moving too quick. Try that again. December, I guess I forgot to hit OK. Okay. Now, what I'd recommend is to save and check as you're working on your workflow. So I kind of did everything all in one shot. Generally, that's not a good approach because it's really easy to go off the tracks. It's better to get those checkpoints to make sure that you're doing exactly what you want, you're getting the results you want, that type of thing. Nevertheless, let's go ahead and run this and we'll see if we get what we're looking for. So we hit run, continue, run flow, and off it goes. Now what's cool about this approach is very efficient. There are slower approaches where you get items and declare variables and all types of things, and that will make for a much less efficient workflow to get summary data. You do not want to do that. And that's part of why I show you this filter array approach, because I want you to be successful and efficient with the workflow that you set up. Alright, so let's go back to SharePoint and let's take a look. Alright, so this was for one row of data, so there's the list. Whoops, I went into the wrong list. Okay, here we go, Wise Industries. There you go. So that counted up the total number of orders for each calendar month. Pretty cool. Alright, that was the longer workflow. The one I'm going to show you now is a bit quicker. We're going to populate the list, which is for multiple rows. So that's why Industries counts multiple row, and that's the next workflow that we're going to build. Kind of shocked that I didn't make any kind of error in building that, but I'm glad. Okay, so I'll go with the automated cloud flow. Whoops, that's not the one I want. I want the instant cloud flow. And again, normally you put these on a schedule, but we're just doing training, so you can just do exactly what I pick. So I'll do manually trigger a flow. Okay, and then do update dates, summary, data, multi. You can call it whatever you want. That's what I'm going to call mine. Just like the other one, we're starting from the same point. We need to get all the records from our source data. So you're going to start with that get items block and click on that. Go to your charting site, reference that, and then go to your list, which is going to be the source data. It's called Wise Industries Orders. Just the same way I did in the last workflow, we're going to put in a filter query. I'm going to say ID any 0 as in not equal 0. That's to suppress that warning message. I don't want it to bother me. I'm going to rename this. So I'm going to say get Wise Industries Orders items. And as you'll always see me do with these get items block, I'll turn on pagination and set this to 5,000. Done. Okay, that's everything we need to do with the get items block. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We have all those records. The next thing we want to do is we've got to get all the records from that multiple row list, which we're going to populate. So we're going to do another get items block. Okay, SharePoint get items, same site, so charts, and then we're getting the multi-row list. We want all the items, so I'm going to do ID any 0, and I'll rename this. Say Wise Industries counts multi-row items. All right. Now we're going to loop through the records on here. So do our next step, select control, and then in there you're going to see the apply to each option. That's what we want to do. It's going to suggest to us the last get items output. So pick the first item you see there, value list of items. And now we're ready to take our next step. Now what we're going to do next, we're going to do a filter array. Unlike last time, we'll only need to do it once because it's going to repeat that command every time that it goes through this loop. and each time we want to update a single record in that list. So we're going to reach for our handy filter array. There it is. Like last time, we're going to need to do in advanced mode. Okay, and then what is the filter array coming from? That's going to be filtering off of our source data, okay? So you want to be very sure and understand what you're doing. I'm not looking for doing a filter on, the secondary loop. I want the first loop. Okay, so I need to make sure I pick the right option. Okay? Now, we need a special formula, which is a little tricky, and that's why I provided to you with the training materials on the website. Okay, so we're going to do another copy and paste. I would recommend you put this in your text editor. That way you can kind of take a look at it. In this case, you should not need to make any changes, but we will take a look just to understand what's going on. This is another composite condition. It's checking for date range. We're saying where the date provided in that loop record is going to be more than the start date and less than the end date. You might remember when we were looking at that SharePoint list, in each of those rows we assigned a start date and an end date. Now you see why those are there. It helps us do that. The date is in that record that we're looping through, and that's what we're referencing. In your case, if you're doing this again in another list, that's what you need to pay attention to. Alright, so I can copy and paste this, so I'll just select all, and it should work in the formula with no modifications. So I do Control A and V, and then I'll just paste right in. Now there's a lot of data in there. You won't see it all on that single line. That's okay. It's all there. It didn't lose anything. It's just kind of trying to cram all that stuff in the box. Okay, and then for the filter array, we don't need to necessarily rename it in this case. So we only have one, so it's not as if we're going to have a hard time keeping track of what we're doing. Okay, so that's going to get a count each time it goes through the loop. So now we need to do a update of that individual record. So this is the update item, and it's going to do that for each of the 12 rows for each of the calendar months. So I'm going to do update item and select that list. So I'm going to select my site first, and then I need to go to my list, which is the multi-row. That's the one we're updating. The ID needs to be passed in dynamically, so that's coming from this apply to each loop. So to get Y's industry counts multi-row items, it's that ID. This orders was our source data. That's not the list we're looping through. We're looping through this second one. So always make sure you're picking the right one, because you can see it gave me two ID options. You want to slow down and think carefully, otherwise you're going to trip yourself up. Okay, and then I only need to update one field. So we've got month, count, start, and end. All of those are already set up. We don't want to change those. If I leave those blank, Power Automate knows to simply not update that field. It won't set them blank, it just won't update that field. Okay, just like we did in the first workflow, we want to use that length expression. There it is. Unlike last time, we only have to do this one time, which is a great relief. I'm sure you will agree. And I can just reference my filter array body, and that'll bring that in for me. Hit OK, and I can save. And you could, relabel the update item if you want to. There's less steps in this workflow, and so in general, I'm a little less concerned about naming. It's those situations like in the last workflow where we've got lots and lots of actions and blocks of code, and things can get very confusing quickly. In that scenario, if you don't label those blocks to help you keep track of what you're doing. Okay, I've saved my workflow. Now we're ready to run. So I'm running that. Off we go. Now this is going to take slightly more time because we're making more updates. A whole 7 seconds. If you remember the last one, it ran in 1 second. That's okay. That's because it needs to do 12 updates in SharePoint when it writes back the data. All right, let's do a refresh. And there you go. So that's it. We completed everything that we wanted to do for our training. And if you made it this far, congratulations on being successful with that. All right. So we're not actually doing charting in this training session. I hope you'll agree this is a lot to digest and learn. And this is all a setup for the fun stuff. So I like to say you've got to eat your vegetables before you get your dessert. And that's just exactly what we're doing. This pattern will serve you well. Every time that you need to get summary data based on dates, you can tap into this, you can reference this content. With a little bit of practice, it should come very easily to you. And this is going to set you up so you can do those trending charts that we discussed at the beginning of the training session, or aggregate those dates to months or quarters or years or however you need to break that up to demonstrate on a chart. So I hope you like that. We're going to go ahead and move into more cool charting templates after this. So good work in learning how to get dates summary data.